All right, welcome back. Thank you to Linda Jen and Lauren Kingsley and Stephen J. Stephen, that's a huge contribution. It is so appreciated. And your longtime uh, dedication to being a friend of this, what we're trying to do here, is uh, it's hugely appreciated. I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and dedicate this uh, particular one to you, Stephen, and thank you for your long, consistent support for the studio and for the studio, for the audio studio. Our question, and I hope you, and I hope you, and I hope you'll really enjoy it. It wasn't your question, but nevertheless. So here's Joshua S. He says, "Hey Paul, I was curious if you could talk about some of the artists that you think might get overlooked. For example, I'm a big fan of William Merritt Chase, Mary Cassatt, and Cecilia Beaux, but I feel you don't hear much about them, except maybe Mary Cassatt. I would be interested if you could bring to light some other strong artists that you believe have the right stuff. Thank you, Joshua S." Obviously, Joshua is talking about American artists, and don't any of you out there in this larger universe get me wrong, uh, thinking I think we're the be all and end all or any of those sorts of things. I'm just responding because he sounds like he's asking me about other American artists. What I'm going to do, what I'm going to try to do today, and hope Mr. Producer can bear with us, is to give you a look at um, a book. See if I can. So we can do this together, Mr. Producer. Um, is to there's only one book that I think everybody ought to read, and I've already suggested it to you. It's called American Arts, Rilla Evelyn Jackman. You'll see why in just about a second. I do like his whatever saying, "As the sun colors flowers, so art colors life." And that's Sir John Lubbock, whoever that is. Apologies to Sir John or his family. But American Arts by Rilla Evelyn Jackman is one of the only uh, history books on American art that's worth anything because they cover us. They really, really, really do a job. And if you haven't read this book, by the way, it's not a question of how well he describes what people are doing, any of those things. It's a fact that he shows their images instead of just Sargent, Mary Cassatt, and Akins. That is not American history. This is American history. So allow me to just to be a little preachy about it, but it's gotten to be to the point where it's really quite amazing. And I'm just going to pop up a bunch of these things. What you can do online yourself is let me see if I can do this. You can page through. Here it comes up. This is on Internet Archives, and I believe that I'm going to try to get Mr. Producer to put these also on our website if it's not already there. But this book, because I did find that the whole book is there online. So now look at this. I'm just going to page over a little bit. So here's the book. Look at that. So there's the table of contents and all that stuff. But look at this list of illustrations. Now you tell me what, and this is not a huge book. You tell me what I'm sorry I don't have it in my hands, by the way, just to show you. But you tell me what American history writer does anything like justice to the American world. Never mind the rest of what happens in all of Europe and all the rest of those places where people have been shut down for so long. Notably the academics by historians. You don't even know the names of these people who are such scary good fellas and women. But just look at this. I'm going to try to bring this up closer so I can see it. But this is a list of illustrations. Here's John Lafarge. I'm going to show you who he is. We've talked about him before, and I'm going to skip the guys that I've shown you a lot before, most of them. But look at this. Here's this list of illustrations. There's John Lafarge. Then there's illustrations. I don't know why that's listed that way. Let's go down here. Here we are. John Lafarge, Maxfield Parrish, William Corman. I'm sorry, my eyes are having a tough time with this. My eyes being what they are these days. Anyway, we go on Albert Herder, and so it goes. So now here we are. This is where it really begins. Sorry. So here's Whistler, Benjamin. I know our Whistler's up there, sort of first. That it must be the frontispiece or something. Benjamin West, Gilbert Stewart, John Nagel, Thomas Sully, Thomas Cole, Thomas Moran, and you're getting the beginning of the Hudson River School there, and then George Innes, and this is all showing the images. Wyant, and his influence was big in that world. Alexander Wyant, and then you go on to Eastman Johnson, William Morris Hunt, and I've talked about all these guys at different times. George Fuller, Winslow Homer, of course, James Whistler. No, so these are all just the illustrations that are in this book, and it just goes on and on and on and on. So those are the ones you've heard. I've talked to you about Whistler, about John White Alexander, William Merritt Chase, Frank Duveneck, Vetaher. We've talked about a little bit. One of the Gamma would refer to him as one of the great self-taughts. I think he refers to Lafarge that way too. But so here's Joseph DeCamp. Here's there's Akins. But look, among many other people, there's Blashfield. You want to understand anything about American art, this is the only resource. And so it goes. I'm not going to show you all that's on here. There's Kenyon Cox, Douglas Volk. You ever heard of Douglas Volk? George DeForest Brush. So I'm just showing it's here. And what we're going to do is sort of page through it. But let me show you how this works, how the book works. So here's the book back to its normal size again. So paging. So crafts and industries, he's talking about pottery, and he covers a lot of people and some important stuff. Several of those colony-type places are referred to here. So there you are. This is what the pages look like. They begin, there's just hundreds, I guess, feels like hundreds of illustrations. So if you want to get to know American painting, get this book. There's lots of them available online, and they're not that expensive. I remember buying 3 of them for about $16 each. I probably pushed the price by doing that. Sorry, guys. But they're out there in the $20 and that sort of thing right now. By the way, if you want to buy them for yourself and your friends, I have found that it's better to buy 3 or 4, as many as you can, before the price goes up, because you're pushing the price by buying. I think. I'm not sure how this world works. So here we are paging through this book. Hope this isn't a problem for you, Mr. Producer. I appreciate your hanging in there. And so I'm not going to keep paging through it, but let's just go over to where we start talking about painting. There you are. And there's going to be all these guys. It's more or less chronological. And so it goes. And so what's going to happen is you're going to see pictures like this. Here's Stewart. You've seen Benjamin West. Let's see if we can get, there's George Innes, which all of you have seen, Mr. Producer's favorite, one of his favorite painters. Wyant. These guys are more in sync with the Barbizon painters, by the way. A lot of that Hudson River School stuff is. But then you go, there's some of the stuff you've already seen before. There's Hunt, there's Akins, here's Lafarge. And what I'm going to do for you, for the fun of it, is put these things into color, show you these guys in color, because it's so easy now to dig them up online. And we'll just briefly talk about them with you. I won't keep going back to this, Mr. Producer. You can use these pages as much as you like. But I want you to know that there is no end to the number of pictures a good person, a good American arts historian could resort to. Why do they do what they do? And limit us to this handful of people. That just, it's a tiring thing. But you'll see why I say that. Okay. Let's just go ahead and chat about some of the pictures. And so these are some of the guys we don't talk about a ton. One of the things I'm telling you again about myself is I come from the point of view of a rather methodology that is based on Boston School painting. These people are the hugest number of these people are influenced by Monet and the Impressionist age, shall we say, and thinking. But other ones are like John Lafarge are way more significant in very different ways, but in very different ways. One of the first paintings I ever saw in New York in person was this John Lafarge at the Church of the Ascension. I want to tell you it's somewhere down there on 10th or 14th Street, somewhere down there. And I'm putting dates up here so you guys can see them. I'm not putting their full names, but their dates. So you'll see this is chronological, but it helps you to understand a little bit better what's going on. So there's John Lafarge. I'm going to talk about these only a little bit. I mean, this is obviously based on Italian Renaissance, very, very Raphael or something. And John Lafarge also has a very interesting background. I want to tell you it's in a very high level of education in another way. I want to tell you he's a lawyer or something. And 2 or 3 or 4 of these guys actually have totally other histories before they really get fully dedicated to the painting world. I'm not here to give you bio though. I'm just going to talk about the pictures when I see something of interest that relates to us. But this relates because it was one of my first experiences. I believe that one on the left, these are both also by John Lafarge, is at, and you can see some of sort of the feeling of what Homer was doing even. But but this guy's, by the way, I think his middle name was Emerson. I believe he's from the Boston, New England area. And so it does feel rather like even maybe young Goodman Brown or some character from the Scarlet Letter. There's something fascinating about, but this is a self-portrait of John Lafarge, and this is a watercolor, which gives you some sense of his aesthetic. Yeah, the aesthetic movement comes into this. But I remember somebody came in with a postcard of Daniel Ridgway Knight. Never seen anything like it before, but I think I was a student at the Art Students League, and I was just blown away by it to the point of being depressed that how would one ever achieve anything like that? Daniel Ridgway Knight. So this is, and by the way, I'm showing what I consider to be some of the most significant or best of their work. There's the stuff that appeals to me the most. But this actually conforms a little bit to that movement that Bastien Lepage was part of later. Lepage was born in 46. Do I have him? Yes, I did keep it. Yeah. I was going to throw that out. This is another one of my early experiences at the Metropolitan Museum, which was my early and often stomping grounds when I was a student at the Art Students League. And I remember being impressed by this, but not having any interest in actually doing anything like this. But this is Joan of Arc. And he's part of what they call the naturalist movements of. You can look it up for yourself. I think the Newland group is in that class and several others. But that is, I believe Knight's teacher was Glare. I believe he was a student of he's just simply an academic in training. So this isn't impressionistic, and you might even say, looking at this, you might see a little bit of the flavor of a Bunker, who we've talked about recently. So Lepage is not an American, by the way, so don't make any mistakes. I didn't mean to say that he was. I'm simply talking about that movement, and I won't be doing that again in this video. Now, I have talked about Thayer before. Thayer is obviously in a sense, a Neo-Greek. He's doing angels, obviously isn't the same thing as what the Greeks did, but, actually, take that back. I mean, what is one of the great ones of all time, the great sculptors of all time? But he was I want to tell you, he was a student of Jerome, a good friend of George de Forest Brush, who was also a student of Jerome. So here we are at 1849, but you can see the emphasis on the sculptural and the monumental. And I highly recommend you guys review his work if you haven't seen much of it. It was Dennis Miller Bunker again who I believe befriended him, saying, "Finally, I found somebody in America who actually who understands our art." That's putting words in his mouth. You can look that quote up. So there's him. 1850, I was born a year later. This is George Hitchcock, and I believe he was also one of those highly educated from some other background, maybe Harvard. And maybe he was a lawyer too. You can look him up. I'm not that guy, but it's amusing stuff to think about. But again, it's maybe slightly closer to what Knight's doing, but you can see the striking influence of the Impressionist mind, even though it's probably what was common to the day, that was the sort of thing that was building up into something that nobody could resist. So he's born what 20 some years after Monet. So that's the equivalent of a generation later. So no question there would have been that influence. He still isn't doing what Monet's doing, but if you look at the left one, I've found any number of these where these people are painting with the influence of Monet, painting women outdoors against the sky, and you've seen that again with Benson and all those guys. And I'm not going to show any of those guys again. So these are all the ones that our historians don't think worthy of your time. They just skip over. In fact, American history doesn't even seem worthy of their time when you write. I don't care if it's Gardner or who it is. Those books, as well written as they are for what they say, it's what they leave out that kills us. They really destroys to me their credibility. And I don't mean to be a negative Nelly on this. So with apologies to all you guys, I know you can't just get everything into your life, but wouldn't it be nice if just one American history or even world history art document would come out that actually begins to do justice to these people who are obviously qualified craftsmen, first order, And again, I'm saying I'm picking the best of their work. I'm not telling you every single thing they did is something I'm vouching for. Abbey was an illustrator, by the way, and he did this work for the I think it's called the Abbey Room, actually, in the Boston Public Library, which was, one of those amazing places that the wealth in Boston dedicated themselves to creating for public consumption, and included putting up murals. There's a really beautiful room with these wood panels in the most wonderful sense of that word, wood paneled and striking strong woodwork. And these panels are up high, and they just go around the room with a beautiful decorative effect. I'm not going to tell you I think most of them succeed perfectly in doing what decorators do in decorating wall spaces. You can feel the illustrator in him, maybe a bit dominating that. But this one is a nice example of what you'd call an essentially symmetrical design, this great sweeping thing. And I suggest is trying to suggest the round table idea. I don't know if this one's called the round table, but these are Arthurian conversations, legends. So, but that gives you some idea. That's the American painter. Now, he was a friend of Sargent's. He lived, I think he was an expatriate. A lot of these guys lived in London, I believe. And again, I'm not showing Sargent either. We see plenty of Sargent. So here, I'm going to jump to the first one. Here's Symonds, 1852. Again, you can feel the influence. There's a book called From 7 to 70, which is a very interesting story. Symonds talks about his trip out west and going by train to the west. So our trains were built like about the time he was born. So by the time he was old enough to travel after his school days, he headed out. I forget who with. Several artists went out with him at different times. But From 7 to 70 is an interesting read for anybody who wants to just read a biography where an artist just talks about what happened with him, what he was doing. And in various ways covers a lot of interesting territory. His background, he's also one of the 10. I believe his background is very similar, going to the Boston School. I want to tell you, he actually was a student at the MFA school, the School of Drawing and Painting, the MFA, and Otto Grundmann would have been his teacher, just like with Tarbell and Benson. But I want to show you this previous one because he did a number of murals that were really quite satisfactory, very delightful, pattern abstractions, and et cetera, et cetera. So Symonds, and you can see that pursuit of impressionist light on the figure, not formulaic. Now, George DeForest Brush, as I said, was a friend of Thayer's. Also, one of the those guys, highly influenced by Jerome and a couple other people. You'd have to, again, you look up the bio. But you'll see that his dedication is to form and line, and it's quite striking. It's quite beautiful. He's also got a feeling for the monumental that's special. I didn't mention my talk about Thayer, that one of my favorite pictures of all time is one of his Angels, the Caritas, but I've showed it to you before, and I didn't want to overdo that. But here's a painting of what would appear again to be an American Indian or something, you know. But this one is a wonderful example of beautiful placement of a figure and use of big open spaces. Very expressive, very, in a sense, powerful, with kind of not much. A little bit of the influence maybe of Helmut Adama or one of those other guys in France. There were a lot of painters over there that you could be influenced by. Now, Douglas Volk, I didn't find a lot of his work that I liked, but I was so struck by this portrait that I wanted to show it. It's just, it's just, just as sweet as can be. Beautiful color. Now, these things again, we can't be sure about the color, but it looks like one of those sort of standards where you set somebody outdoors and use green to set off this because it makes the skin look so healthy. At least on a white person, probably on most skin colors, though I think you'll find, because of the welcome influence of the reds, which are somehow healthy. Now Blum, one of the earliest trips to my Brooklyn Museum when I was at the Art Students League, you walk in the main doors and you turn around and look up, and there's this totally understated, magical mural, extremely light. I believe it's a light wall. It looks like a light wall, though I think that's the actual wall, but it's really beautifully made to fit onto a very pale wall. Really beautiful, not in that class of not punching holes in the wall. Again, you can see this guy Blum now, another expatriate, wound up living in Japan. I'm not bringing back his influences, so we'll have to let that go. But you can see that he's got a terrific sense of design here. He's got the whole idea of the garlands thing, and you can see that the process of everything is a garland. Everything is sweeping like this. You see the orientation is to garland the whole painting. So that's in the class of what we think of as the main line of a painting, that unifying great line of a painting. And very interesting and delightful interplay of pattern and color. So, yeah, what's not to love? Expatriate to Japan. Now, Robert Reed, was he also? You'll have to look him up. But Robert Reed is extremely interesting in that he takes the Impressionist stuff, and so a couple of these guys do. He's thought of as an early, or maybe, well, obviously influenced by the Whistler world and stuff like that, tonalist, but a decorative painter. Every one of his pictures takes on this coloristic, fascinating coloristic decorativeness, and of course the shapes and all that sort of stuff. The fun of all this stuff is delightful as well. But this is something that's not uncommon with him, and these are kinds of ones you might want to look up. You can see them better in the original for sure, but online you can find better reproductions. But this is one of those cases where the understated low contrast values that make tonalism into a sort of a mood-setting sort of thing is being explored. Of course, you do see that in Whistler and all the tonalists. There's an indication toward that. Innes I'm not using, but he's there. Now, Guerin is actually one of the most fascinating ones that I found here, and partly because he reminds me of what Gemmell's conversation about patterning. And this is such an overstated idea. Look at the pattern of the trees. Look at the fascinating patterning created here. Between these tree blobs, the white blobs in between them, and then the next level of lights. I guess I'd call them lesser lights. But sort of a standard, and there were lots of these being done at the time. I mean, I've shown you those by Blasfield and by even Joseph de Camp and some of the other guys that never found a wall. These things were being about. By the way, people would be competing for these at times. I should know where this one is, and I'm sorry I've forgotten. Um, yeah, I want to tell you it's a library too, but I'm not sure I know. But that Guerin, but look at this. You want to have some fun with Guerin. And by the way, there's nothing about what can't be. When you start talking decoratively, the field is purely decoratively, That's say creating a beautiful pattern for a wall or for a plate or whatever you want to talk about. Um, you know, that's an appropriate use of obviously of our form. It isn't dominated by making a thing accurate as much, but and yet, and this is where you want to talk about it, the truth of the proportions and all that sort of thing. That's where the truth factor comes in. The plausibility of the perspective and all that sort of stuff is all pretty big and important stuff. But our form can be used for so many things, and I hope this begins to illustrate it. Jules Guerin, I think he painted in this country. The information is all out there, very clear, easy to find. But he seems like he's like a table setter for the poster, the poster world coming up. And by the way, I know there were Frenchmen and maybe even English guys that were doing this in the illustrating world already. But these are fascinating patternistic things. If you look at Arthur Dow and other people like that, you can see there was the aesthetics movement was adopting these uses of pattern, but making it really boldly, powering them out so the pattern became the fun. This is just a fascinating pattern on a rectangle, and as you can see, these layers of color, just inherently fun to look at. They're bringing this interesting. Wow, look at the magical movement from this rich to this less rich to the green almost version of that peach color. Just the sheer beauty of these movements through these areas. But that's what there's no end of what you can do when you start talking about what this is latent with the potential of these things. Maybe we've become jaded to it. Some people referring to him as an illustrator. I think of him far more as a wall decorator. And this is again where you can see that they would keep the wall flat. But Jules Guerin, what's not to love? And Redfield. Now, is it Robert Redfield? Sorry, I lost his name. But he's really another one of those tonalist guys. Again, you can feel the influence of the Barbizon with tonalism frequently. Some of my friends in the world today are doing similar kinds of things using. And by the way, I'm using mood as their chief content, if you want to put it that way. But it's all beautiful patterning. It's beautifully balanced pictures, lovely color relations. But this isn't the world of Impressionism. This is a little bit more like in these particular browner ones, more like the Hudson River School or the Barbizoners. But this is a significant part of the tonalist package. And my impression is that a significant part of his work was done indoors. I don't know how much of it, like in the case of Innes, supposedly he painted on the spot, and then he would bring the painting indoors and just turn it into what he turned it into. And frequently they would resort to or move over toward the tonalist. So there's Redfield, 1869. Again, you're going to have to look up their backgrounds. They're fun. It's very interesting where some of these people are coming from. But this might even be a more striking example. I remember Gamble talking fondly of Frisica. And it would be, this thing could take all day if I would give you all the backgrounds of these guys. Look it up for yourself. But this guy is clearly in the pattern of what you would call decorative color. This, if you've been in a spot like this, it doesn't exactly do that, does it? So it's taking a slice of nature and doing like the cold greens to the icy blue, to the icy red, so we say, the purples. This whole world is its own amazing creation, and he's switched all over into the warmer world up here, and all these beautiful this beautiful interplay of these colors, and just on the face of it. I was looking at one of my students' works the other day. She had just painted somebody who was a Cambodian dancer, I think, and he brought in a bunch of beautiful clothes, and I'm looking at a piece that she's got blasting off the page, and I'm saying, look at the rest of your work, how dull it begins to appear. Is there a reason why we can't have rich color in pictures? But there you are. one of those places where you feel like that would be fun. That would be a pleasing thing to the eye. But you see him switching to a whole different color scheme, using looks like the same umbrella probably or something, maybe not. And but you can see the whole switch. But it's all harmonious, very limited in the one sense, color harmonies. You can see the influence of Degas here. By the way, this guy's born 30 years or so after Degas, or 40 years, I guess. 40 years more like it. So you begin to see that these people were not paying attention to the world around them. Degas, as I said, is the guy who sees Impressionism and this color play thing and is deciding how to make it to make music with it. The color relations world. And there's no question that's what these guys are doing. If you think of, we've talked about Albert Moore, the wonderful British, I'd like to call him a tonalist, but it's not quite the right word for him. And Daniel Garber, the Pennsylvania Academy had a bunch of people that were interesting. And I'm going to tell you, he's out of also Cincinnati, which is also fun. But one of the things I really get a kick out of is his feeling for this grand vista thing, and yet and frequently setting it off by some very close up. So this is classically, by Gamalish, it's not classically called a pusher back. I think it was Paxton's term, but the darks here just setting off this feast over here. Really beautiful, very patternistic, very decorative, very very pleasing in the shall we say in the abstract, but also in just the sheer way you've seen it yourself, walking down a street or driving down a road, how beautiful colors are between the dark trees. And there are the guys achieving and making some feast out of it. What's not to love? Why aren't these guys in the history books? Isn't it interesting? So, Stephen, enjoy. It's been fun. I'm going to do this again. There are numbers of people I've totally not discussed here. There's so much more to it. If I let's see if I can bring it back. If I can just get you all to take your time and page through this book, the Jackman book, you'll see Duveneck. There's several Duvenecks. He was known for these still lifes. If he said, I'm probably going to be known for these still lifes. And it's, I'm sorry, Chase, who was one of the Duveneck boys. I apologize for that. This sculpture at Boston, which also in Boston, I'm not sure if it's other places, of his wife by Duveneck. It's really a beautiful piece, a memorial sculpture. So there's Whistler. You can see what's happening here. I'm just paging the pages with you. Hopefully, Mr. Producer is bearing with me. I think I've kept this pretty well under control, haven't I, Mr. Producer? Yeah. So there's the guys we've talked about, John White Alexander, some of the pictures I've shown you closer. And then numbers of other guys we haven't talked about and we're going to talk about. There's DeCamp. You see what a quality work this is, though? You can have your Aikens, but have your Blashfields. Have your George DeForest brushes. Have your, Thayers. You have your Dewings. You see that Dewing up there? We've talked about Dewing. See that? This is what an amazing book. What an amazing book. I'm not going to tell you it's the most brilliantly written book I've ever seen. Don't even go there, but it's so much more valuable than anything else out there just because it gives you a lead. You wouldn't know to go look at these things. So that's why I like the question, actually. You wouldn't know to go look for these pictures unless there was a resource like this. There's Emil Carlson and his son. That's really fascinating stuff. Another one of those guys that sometimes is thought of as one of the tonalists. Or I guess he frankly is simply one of the tonalists. Part of the aesthetic movement. Theodore Robinson we talk about as part of the grand carryover of the Monet thing into this country. So it goes. Let's see, there's one excellent one in on Mary Cassatt. Of course, everybody gets Mary Cassatt. But, here we are with, is that Frisica then? Yeah. So you see what I mean? All right. So with that, with much love, Stephen Jameson, thank you so much for all your time, all your support all this time. And I wish you the very, very best. And to all of you, I hope to see you next week, and I hope you have a great painting week. Hopefully it's part 2 next week, but I'll do a part 2 because there's so many more to do. Get your copy of Jackman's book if you're interested in American arts. Hopefully there's something just like this over in Europe for you guys, or in France or in England, so you can get your heads around what a wealth there is of beautiful work and stuff to be, stuff that may be more down your alley, in terms of when you're trying to figure out, you're trying to find what it is to love. You can suddenly find yourself looking at something and thinking, oh man, that's me. And there are branches to the tree, right? So why not? It's very inspiring, though, to look at these things. And I really recommend you get online, even once you've seen these pages, these names. Get online and look at a body of their work. You're not going to find it all wonderful, but you're going to find just such a myriad of fingerprints, different kinds of ways of thinking and seeing, with this one thing that we do, which is called representational painting. Yeah, it's all right. All right, from me to you, have a great week. Thank you all for subscribing, sharing, liking, all the things you do, donating, and bring more comments. Keep your comments coming. This is one that it was just time for it. And especially after that dry thing I did with Leonardo, it was very timely. So picture. We'll do it again. Okay, take care. Have a great week.